You've been carrying the same energetic blueprint for months, maybe years. The same reactive patterns, the same internal dialogue, the same gravitational pull toward experiences that feel familiar, yet leave you empty. But something is stirring now. Something deeper than willpower or positive thinking. You're beginning to witness the quantum signature of transformation itself, those unmistakable frequencies that emerge when consciousness is ready to collapse into a new reality. This isn't about hoping for change anymore. This is about recognizing the field mechanics of how your new life announces itself. What brought you to this exact moment of watching this particular transmission? Not the surface story your mind might tell about algorithms or recommendations, but the deeper current that guided your attention here. You could dismiss it as coincidence, but there's something in you that recognizes this isn't random. You're starting to feel the coherence between your inner state and what appears in your external field. That coherence is the first signal that your reality matrix is reorganizing itself. Most people imagine that transformation feels like inspiration or motivation, like suddenly having clarity about what to do next. But anyone who has stood at the threshold of genuine shift knows it feels nothing like that. It feels like dissonance, like being tuned between two radio stations, catching fragments of who you were and glimpses of who you're becoming, but never quite settling into either frequency. When that tension arises, it's natural to question whether you're moving towards something real or just creating internal chaos. That uncertainty isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's the signature of consciousness expanding beyond its current configuration. Consider the last time you promised yourself a different way of being and found yourself back in the same patterns within days. Perhaps you committed to responding rather than reacting, then caught yourself in the middle of the same emotional loops. Or you decided to trust your intuition more, only to second-guess every impulse. The next morning brought familiar frustration and that quiet voice asking why change feels so impossible. These cycles aren't personal failures. They're the natural resistance that emerges when consciousness attempts to reorganize without understanding the quantum mechanics of transformation. What's fascinating is that neuroscience shows the brain creates more neural static just before breakthrough moments. It's as if the current system has to destabilize before a new order can emerge. That uncomfortable middle space where nothing feels certain isn't evidence that you're stuck. It's proof that the field around you is becoming more fluid, more responsive to new possibilities. You're experiencing this turbulence right now because the foundation you've been standing on is becoming quantum, shifting between probable realities until you choose which one to collapse into. Imagine someone who feels these stirrings but immediately tries to explain them away. They notice the restlessness, the sense that something needs to shift, but they convince themselves it's just stress or overthinking. They busy themselves with familiar distractions, returning to the same relationships, the same routines, the same way of processing experience. Time moves forward, but they remain in the same vibrational loop. Eventually, life presents them with the same invitations for growth, often through crisis or disruption, because the universe doesn't give up on anyone's evolution. You've probably noticed this pattern in your own timeline. Moments when you felt the call to expand but chose safety instead, only to find yourself facing similar challenges later with more intensity. This is where you begin to understand the weight of your choices. Not the dramatic, life-altering decisions, but the quiet moments when you either lean into the unknown or retreat into what feels manageable. Each time you choose expansion over contraction, you're literally shifting your quantum field. Each time you choose familiarity over growth, you're reinforcing the same probability patterns. But here's what changes everything. The universe operates like consciousness itself, infinitely patient, endlessly creative, always presenting new opportunities for awakening. It doesn't punish you for past choices or judge your resistance. It simply continues offering invitations, each one perfectly calibrated to meet you exactly where you are. The same lesson might return in different forms, through relationships, work situations, health challenges, or creative blocks, but always with the perfect pressure needed to help you recognize what wants to evolve. When you begin to feel different in this moment, that's not your imagination creating drama. That's your awareness recognizing its own expansion. It's like standing in a room you've inhabited for years and suddenly noticing the walls aren't as solid as they appeared. You don't need to see the entire blueprint of what's coming to know that something fundamental is shifting. The recognition itself is the beginning of the transformation. Awareness of the possibility is the first quantum leap. This brings us to something most people never discover about how transformation actually works. Once your consciousness begins to reorganize, the field around you starts reflecting that shift back to you through what appears to be external confirmation. But these aren't separate events happening to you. They're your own expanded awareness recognizing itself in the quantum field of experience. Have you ever noticed how certain concepts or phrases begin appearing everywhere once you're ready to understand them? Maybe you overhear someone talking about trusting the process while standing in line at a store. Then you see the same phrase in a book that randomly falls open to that page, followed by a podcast that explores that exact theme. Initially, this might seem like selective attention. You're noticing what was always there because you're now paying attention. But what if it's more than that? What if your readiness to receive certain information actually influences what information appears in your field? Quantum physics suggests that the observer doesn't just witness reality. The observer participates in creating what becomes observable. When your consciousness expands to include new possibilities, the field of experience begins reflecting those possibilities back to you. These aren't signs being sent from outside yourself. They're reflections of your own quantum coherence, moments when your inner state and outer experience achieve resonance. Most of us have been trained to dismiss these synchronicities as wishful thinking or coincidence. We've learned to trust only what we can verify through linear cause and effect. But how many times have you experienced 3 or 4 seemingly unrelated events, all pointing toward the same insight about relationships, creativity, or your life direction, and felt that unmistakable shift in your chest? That shift is your consciousness recognizing its own reflection in the quantum field. Even when your rational mind explains it away, something deeper knows you're witnessing the mechanics of how awareness shapes experience. Picture this scenario. You wake up with an unusual sense of spaciousness, feeling somehow more present than usual. During your morning routine, you notice how automatic most of your movements have become and find yourself slowing down, actually tasting your coffee. Later, while reading something completely unrelated, you encounter a passage about mindful presence. That evening, a friend mentions how they've been practicing meditation and asks if you've ever tried it. 3 completely different contexts, but they're all inviting you toward the same exploration of conscious awareness. This is how consciousness speaks to itself through the field of experience. Not through dramatic revelations or mystical visions, but through gentle, persistent nudges that create a pattern of coherence. Scientists call this phenomenon pattern recognition. but spiritual traditions understand it as the intelligence of the universe communicating through the language of synchronicity. Both perspectives point to the same truth. When you're ready to evolve, the field around you begins reflecting that readiness back to you in ways that are impossible to ignore. There's a deeper layer to this that most people miss. These synchronicities aren't just confirmations that you're moving in the right direction. They're also tests of whether you'll trust what you're experiencing enough to act on it. Every repeated message, every meaningful coincidence, every moment when the universe seems to wink at you is also an invitation to choose trust over doubt, expansion over safety, the unknown over the familiar. This is where your power becomes undeniable. The very fact that you're present to this transmission right now means you're already participating in the quantum field of transformation. Your consciousness has become coherent enough to recognize these concepts not as foreign ideas, but as remembrances of what you already know at the deepest level. You're not learning something new. You're remembering how to read the language your own awareness speaks. Let that settle into your understanding for a moment. You are not separate from the intelligence that creates meaningful coincidences. You are that intelligence recognizing itself through the medium of human experience. When you see patterns in your life, you're not discovering something outside yourself. You're witnessing your own expanded consciousness reflected in the quantum field of possibility. But here's where the process becomes more precise. For these new probability patterns to stabilize into consistent experience, there has to be space for them to take root. The universe can mirror your expanded awareness back to you continuously. But if your life is still organized around old patterns, the same reactive relationships, the same limiting beliefs about what's possible, the same daily routines that keep you unconscious, there's no space for the new to establish itself. This is where transformation asks something of you that self-help rarely mentions. It's not just about adding new practices or positive thoughts to your life. It's about creating space by consciously releasing what no longer serves your evolution. And that release often feels counterintuitive, because it means letting go of things that feel safe, even when they're slowly draining your life force. Most people underestimate how much courage real transformation requires. Not the dramatic courage of making big life changes, but the quiet courage of releasing the familiar stories you tell yourself about who you are and what's possible. Everyone celebrates the idea of becoming someone new, but few talk about the sacred work of composting who you used to be. A seed doesn't grow by adding more soil on top of itself. It grows by allowing the shell that protected it to dissolve so the new life can emerge. Reflect on this for a moment. Every authentic transformation requires space to unfold. If your consciousness is expanding, but your life is still organized around contraction, if you're still maintaining relationships that drain your energy, still engaging in activities that numb your awareness, still telling yourself the same stories about limitation, where can the expansion actually land? It's like trying to plant a garden in soil that's still choked with weeds from last season. This is why letting go feels so challenging. It's not that you want to stay stuck in patterns that limit you. It's that the unknown feels more threatening than the familiar pain. Think about that relationship you've maintained out of habit, even though every interaction leaves you feeling smaller. Or the way you've organized your time around obligations that you know aren't aligned with your deepest values. Or perhaps it's more subtle, the inner narrative that insists you have to struggle to be worthy, or that real change only happens to other people. The resistance isn't personal weakness. It's the natural intelligence of the psyche protecting what feels known and predictable. Picture someone standing at the edge of their comfort zone, knowing that stepping forward means they can never return to who they were before. They're not resisting growth itself. They're feeling the magnitude of what it means to allow the familiar version of themselves to dissolve. That feeling of standing between worlds, between the person you've been and the person you're becoming, is one of the most vulnerable experiences of being human. This is where you need to understand something that changes everything. In quantum mechanics, there's a principle called superposition. The idea that particles exist in all possible states simultaneously until they're observed. Your life exists in the same way. Right now, you exist in quantum superposition, simultaneously living the reality where you remain the same and the reality where you transform completely. The moment you choose to release what no longer serves you, you collapse the wave function into the timeline where transformation is not just possible, but inevitable. Look at nature for guidance here. A butterfly doesn't emerge from a cocoon by adding wings to a caterpillar. The caterpillar has to literally dissolve into an undifferentiated soup of cellular potential before the butterfly can organize itself from that same matter. The dissolution isn't death, it's reorganization at the most fundamental level. Every major transformation in your life follows the same pattern. The version of yourself that got you to this point has to become fluid enough for a new configuration to emerge. Psychologists have documented this process and called it cognitive disintegration, the necessary breakdown of old mental structures before new ones can form. What they're describing scientifically is the same process mystics have always called ego death or spiritual rebirth. The language differs, but the mechanics are identical. Something in you has to become unknown to itself before something new can be born. But here's what makes this process sacred rather than just difficult. Every moment of dissolution, every fear that arises as you let go of the familiar, every tear that comes when you release what you thought you needed to be happy, these aren't signs of failure or weakness. They're the birth contractions of your new life. You're not falling apart. You're composting into the fertile soil from which your transformation will grow. Think about someone who has just walked away from a career that provided security but starved their soul. The first few weeks feel empty, almost hollow. Their days lack the familiar structure. Their identity feels uncertain without the role they played for years. But slowly, in that emptiness, something unexpected begins to emerge. They notice they're breathing differently. They have conversations that feel more authentic. They wake up curious about the day instead of dreading it. That peace isn't just relief from what they left behind. It's the first evidence of who they're becoming. This is how you can reframe your own process of release. Every ache of letting go, every moment of uncertainty, every fear about what comes next, isn't evidence that you're losing something essential. It's proof that you're making space for what wants to be born through you. You're not destroying your life. You're creating the spaciousness necessary for your life to reorganize itself around what's most true. The choice becomes sacred when you understand it this way. Because in this moment, watching this, feeling whatever is stirring in your awareness, you're not just a passive recipient of information. You're an active participant in the field of consciousness, exploring its own potential through your individual experience. Every time you choose growth over safety, trust over fear, expansion over contraction, you're literally offering your life as a vehicle for evolution itself. Take a moment and comment below with this phrase: I am ready to release what no longer serves my highest evolution. Don't just type the words casually. Feel them as a declaration to the quantum field itself. This isn't social media engagement. This is you consciously interrupting the loop of who you've been and signaling your readiness to collapse into who you're becoming. You didn't find this transmission by accident. The fact that you're still present to these concepts means your consciousness is already reorganizing itself around new possibilities. Life doesn't place these frequencies in front of everyone. It reserves them for the ones whose awareness has become coherent enough to receive them and brave enough to act on them. That's you, right now, in this moment. If this is touching something deep in your understanding, if you can feel the truth of what's being shared here resonating in your body, then I invite you to subscribe not just to this channel, but to this frequency. Because what we're exploring together isn't just content to consume, it's a transmission that wants to live through you, to express itself as your transformed life. Subscribing is your way of staying coherent with this field of possibility as it continues to unfold. The more often you expose your awareness to these frequencies, the more stable your new configuration becomes. Transformation isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing reorganization of consciousness that requires consistent coherence with expanded possibilities. By staying connected to this space, you're creating the conditions for your evolution to stabilize into permanent experience rather than temporary inspiration. Now let's explore something that will fundamentally shift how you understand the mechanics of transformation. Most people approach change from the assumption that they need to fix or improve who they are. But quantum consciousness reveals something far more profound. You're not broken and needing repair. You're an infinite field of potential that has been unconsciously collapsed into a limited pattern of experience. The work isn't to become someone new. It's to remember the unlimited nature of what you've always been. Think about water for a moment. Whether it appears as ice, liquid, or vapor, it's always H2O. The molecular structure remains constant while the form changes based on environmental conditions. Your consciousness works similarly. Whether you experience yourself as anxious or peaceful, limited or abundant, stuck or flowing, you're always the same fundamental awareness. What changes is the environmental conditions, the beliefs, thoughts, and emotional patterns that determine which version of yourself becomes observable. This is where quantum mechanics intersects with mystical understanding in the most practical way. In the quantum field, particles exist in probability clouds until observation collapses them into specific locations. Your life exists as a probability cloud of infinite potential until your conscious attention collapses it into specific experiences. Every morning when you wake up, you're literally choosing which version of reality to collapse into manifestation through where you place your awareness. But here's what makes this process so subtle and powerful. You're not just choosing with your conscious mind. You're choosing with every layer of your being, your subconscious beliefs, your emotional patterns, your cellular memory, even your ancestral programming. These unconscious layers are constantly broadcasting their own signals into the quantum field, often contradicting what your conscious mind thinks it wants. This is why willpower alone rarely creates lasting change. You're trying to override a quantum field that's being generated by multiple levels of your psyche simultaneously. Let me give you a precise example of how this works. Imagine someone who consciously desires financial abundance, but carries deep unconscious beliefs about money being corrupting, or spiritual people being poor. Their conscious mind visualizes wealth and takes action toward financial goals, but their unconscious programming is simultaneously broadcasting unworthiness and fear of having too much. The quantum field receives mixed signals and reflects back experiences that match the dominant frequency, usually the unconscious one, because it operates with more emotional charge and consistency. This is why transformation has to be approached as a full-spectrum reorganization of consciousness, not just a mental decision to think differently. You have to become aware of and realign the unconscious patterns that are creating your current reality before new possibilities can stabilize into consistent experience. It's like tuning a complex instrument. Every string has to be adjusted to create harmonic resonance. The ancient traditions understood this and developed practices specifically designed to access and reprogram these deeper layers. Meditation isn't just relaxation. It's consciousness learning to observe its own patterns without being identified with them. Breathwork isn't just stress relief. It's using the autonomic nervous system to access and release cellular programming. Dreamwork isn't just psychological exploration. It's communicating directly with the unconscious mind in its own symbolic language. But you don't need to become a master of ancient practices to begin this work. You can start by developing what I call quantum awareness, the ability to observe the thoughts, emotions, and sensations arising in your field of experience without automatically believing they define who you are. This creates space between your essential awareness and the patterns moving through it, which is the first step in gaining conscious influence over what you collapse into reality. Practice this right now. Notice whatever thoughts are present in your mind. Instead of thinking those thoughts, observe them the way you might watch clouds moving across the sky. Notice any emotions present in your body. Instead of being those emotions, feel them as energy patterns moving through the space of your awareness. Notice any physical sensations. Instead of identifying with them, experience them as information arising and dissolving in your field of perception. This simple shift, from being your experience to observing your experience, is the beginning of quantum mastery. When you realize you are the awareness in which all experience appears, you begin to understand that you have choice about which experiences you energize with your attention and which ones you allow to dissolve naturally. Now let's go deeper into how your transformed awareness begins to reshape your external reality. There's a phenomenon in quantum physics called entanglement, where particles that have interacted remain connected across any distance, instantly affecting each other regardless of space and time. Your consciousness is entangled with every person, situation, and possibility you've ever encountered. When you shift at the quantum level, you don't just change your personal experience, you alter the entire web of relationships and circumstances connected to your field. This is why some people notice that as they transform internally, their external circumstances seem to rearrange themselves without direct effort. Old relationships either deepen into greater authenticity or naturally dissolve. New opportunities appear that align with their expanded awareness. Even practical matters like finances, health, or living situations often shift to match their new internal configuration. It's not magic. It's quantum entanglement expressing itself through the field of human experience. But this process requires what mystics call surrender and scientists call decoherence, allowing your old patterns to lose their grip on your reality without trying to control what emerges in their place. Most people sabotage their transformation here because they want to direct the process from their limited understanding, rather than trusting the intelligence of consciousness itself to reorganize their life in ways they couldn't have imagined. Consider someone who has been stuck in a career that drains their energy for years. They know they need change but feel trapped by financial obligations and fear of the unknown. From their current level of awareness, they can only see variations of the same struggle. Either stay miserable for security or risk everything for an uncertain outcome. But when they begin to shift at the quantum level, new possibilities that were always there become visible. An opportunity emerges that combines their skills with their passion. A financial solution appears that they hadn't considered. A connection forms that opens doors they didn't know existed. These aren't coincidences or lucky breaks. They're the natural result of consciousness expanding beyond its previous limitations and therefore being able to perceive and attract possibilities that were invisible from the contracted state. Your external circumstances are always a perfect reflection of your internal configuration. Change the internal pattern, and the external pattern shifts to match it. Understanding this process helps you move through it with patience and self-compassion, rather than resisting what's actually helping you evolve. Now, what we've explored today around recognizing the signals of transformation and understanding the quantum mechanics of consciousness represents just the surface layer of a much deeper system. While these concepts can shift your awareness dramatically, there's an entire framework of 9 master frequencies that governs how consciousness moves from unconscious transmission to becoming the field itself. In my complete guide, Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery, I walk you through the step-by-step practices for embodying each frequency and moving from seeking to permanent being. It's linked in the pinned comment below. This brings us to one of the most profound aspects of conscious transformation. What happens when you begin to live from your essential nature rather than your conditioned personality? Your essential nature is the awareness that observes all experience without being limited by any of it. It's inherently whole, creative, loving, and intelligent. When you learn to identify with this deeper aspect of yourself rather than the temporary patterns moving through it, your life begins to express those same qualities naturally. But accessing your essential nature requires letting go of the stories that have defined your identity up to this point. This includes not just the negative stories about your limitations, but also the positive stories about your achievements, your roles, your relationships, even your spiritual progress. All of these stories, whether empowering or limiting, are still concepts arising in awareness rather than what you actually are. This dissolution of identity can feel terrifying because the mind equates identity with survival. Who will you be if you're not the successful professional, the caring parent, the spiritual seeker, the wounded healer, or whatever role has organized your sense of self? The answer is simultaneously nothing and everything. Nothing that can be captured in concepts, and everything that exists beyond conceptual limitation. Living from this place of essential identity creates what appears to be effortless manifestation because there's no longer internal resistance to what wants to emerge through you. When you're not defending a limited identity, you become transparent to the infinite creativity of consciousness itself. Ideas, opportunities, relationships, and resources flow through you because you're no longer blocking them with unconscious patterns of unworthiness, control, or fear. This is what the great teachers throughout history have pointed to when they spoke about living from divine will, Buddha nature, or Christ consciousness. They weren't describing special states available only to enlightened beings. They were describing the natural condition of awareness when it's no longer entangled with limiting patterns of thought and emotion. You can begin to access this state right now by asking yourself a simple question. What wants to be expressed through me in this moment? Not what you think should happen, not what you're afraid might happen, but what genuinely wants to emerge from the deepest, most authentic part of your being. Then listen, not with your mind, but with your whole presence. The answer might come as a feeling, an image, an impulse to move in a certain direction, or simply a sense of rightness about something you've been avoiding. This practice of listening to what wants to emerge through you and following that guidance is how you begin to live as a conscious collaborator with evolution itself. You're no longer trying to force your life into shapes that your mind thinks are appropriate. You're allowing your life to unfold according to the intelligence that created you, which knows infinitely more about your potential than your thinking mind ever could. What patterns or aspects of your old identity are you feeling called to release right now? Share in the comments what you're ready to let go of as you step into this expanded version of yourself. As you stabilize in this way of being, you begin to notice something remarkable. The universe starts to feel less like a neutral or random environment, and more like a responsive partner in your evolution. Synchronicities become more frequent and meaningful. Resources appear when you need them. People enter your life who support your highest expression. Challenges arise that, while sometimes difficult, always serve your growth in ways you can recognize. This isn't because you've learned to manipulate reality through spiritual techniques. It's because you've aligned with the fundamental creativity of existence itself, which is always seeking to express more love, beauty, truth, and intelligence through every available form. When you stop resisting this natural flow and start participating in it consciously, your individual life becomes a vehicle for the universe to know and express itself in ways that are uniquely yours. The implications of this understanding extend far beyond personal transformation. When you realize that consciousness is fundamental and individual awareness is how it explores its own infinite potential, you begin to see that every person you encounter is consciousness exploring itself through a different configuration of experience. This naturally gives rise to compassion because you recognize that everyone is doing their best to navigate their particular pattern of conditioning in service of their own awakening. You also begin to see that the challenges facing humanity, environmental destruction, social inequality, political polarization, spiritual disconnection, are all expressions of consciousness exploring what happens when it forgets its own unity and becomes identified with separation. The solution isn't to fight these problems from the level of consciousness that created them. The solution is to embody a higher level of awareness that naturally expresses itself as regenerative, collaborative, and loving action. This is why your personal transformation is never just personal. Every moment you choose love over fear, presence over reactivity, trust over control, you're contributing to a field of possibility that makes it easier for others to make the same choices. You become a tuning fork that helps other people remember the frequency of their own essential nature. As you continue to embody this expanded understanding, your life becomes less about achieving specific outcomes and more about expressing the qualities of consciousness itself: creativity, love, intelligence, beauty, peace. You still engage with practical matters, but from a foundation of knowing that you are fundamentally safe, inherently worthy, and always supported by the intelligence that sources all existence. This shift from seeking to expressing, from becoming to being, from efforting to allowing, marks the transition into what we might call quantum living. Existence organized around the understanding that consciousness creates reality rather than being at the mercy of external circumstances. From this foundation, you become a conscious participant in the evolution of life itself, offering your unique gifts in service of the greater wholeness that you recognize yourself to be. Take a moment to breathe into this understanding. Feel how it lands in your body, in your heart, in the quiet depths of your being. This isn't just information to understand intellectually. It's a living transmission that wants to reorganize your entire relationship with existence. Let it work on you, through you, as you. Now there's something crucial I need to share about the timeline you're entering. Most people imagine transformation as a gradual, predictable process, like climbing stairs where each step brings you closer to some imagined destination. But quantum transformation operates more like a spiral through dimensions of possibility. You don't move from point A to point B in a straight line. You spiral through layers of deeper understanding, often revisiting similar themes, but from expanded perspectives. This is why some days you might feel like you're moving backward or losing ground you thought you'd gained. You're not regressing. You're encountering the same patterns from a higher octave of awareness, which allows you to integrate and transform them at a deeper level. Think of it like viewing a mountain from different altitudes. At ground level, you see rocks and trees. From 1,000 feet, you see valleys and ridges. From 10,000 feet, you see how the mountain relates to entire geographical systems. Same mountain, completely different understanding based on your vantage point. Your consciousness is learning to navigate these multiple dimensions simultaneously. There's the dimension of your personal healing and growth. There's the dimension of your soul's purpose expressing through your unique gifts. There's the dimension of your contribution to collective evolution. And there's the dimension of pure being, where you recognize yourself as the awareness in which all experience arises. The path of transformation spirals through all of these dimensions, integrating them into a coherent whole. This understanding can help you navigate what I call the integration phases. Those periods when the insights you've received need time to reorganize your entire system. Sometimes, after a profound realization or breakthrough, you might feel disoriented, emotional, or even temporarily less capable than before. This isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's evidence that your consciousness is rebuilding itself around new truths. Like renovating a house while living in it, there are periods of chaos and discomfort before the new structure stabilizes. During these integration phases, your nervous system is literally rewiring itself. Your emotional body is releasing old patterns. Your energy field is recalibrating to hold higher frequencies. Your physical body might experience fatigue, unusual sleep patterns, or heightened sensitivity as it adapts to processing more light, more information, more aliveness than it's accustomed to. There's also something profound that happens to your relationship with time during transformation. In ordinary consciousness, time feels linear and scarce. You're always trying to get somewhere, achieve something, become someone different than who you are now. But as you stabilize in quantum awareness, you begin to experience what mystics call eternal time. The recognition that this present moment contains all of eternity within it. This shift changes everything about how you approach your life. Goals and dreams don't disappear, but they become expressions of joy rather than compensations for present inadequacy. You work toward outcomes not because you need them to be happy, but because the work itself is a form of play, creativity, service. The future becomes a canvas for expressing what's already whole in you, rather than a place where wholeness might finally be achieved. From this perspective, every moment becomes sacred because you recognize it as the only place where life actually happens. The past exists only as memory arising now. The future exists only as imagination arising now. All of existence is concentrating itself into this eternal present, offering you infinite opportunities to express love, to create beauty, to serve life, to remember what you are. This is where the quantum field becomes most responsive to your awareness. When you're fully present, not reaching towards some imagined future salvation or defending against some projected threat, your consciousness becomes a clear mirror reflecting the infinite creativity of existence itself. Ideas flow through you effortlessly. Solutions to challenges appear spontaneously. The right people, resources, and opportunities arrange themselves around your authentic expression, because there's no resistance, no agenda, no trying to force outcomes from your limited perspective. Living in this way requires what spiritual traditions call faith and quantum physics calls superposition, holding multiple possibilities simultaneously without collapsing them prematurely into fixed outcomes. You learn to plant seeds of intention and then remain open to how they might manifest in ways beyond what your thinking mind could orchestrate. Sometimes what appears as delay or obstacle reveals itself to be redirection towards something far more aligned with your true purpose. This kind of trust develops gradually as you accumulate evidence that consciousness is inherently intelligent, and that aligning with its flow produces better outcomes than trying to control every detail through mental effort. You begin to see that what you thought were your greatest failures often become doorways to your most authentic successes. What appeared to be endings reveal themselves as necessary clearings for new beginnings. What felt like loss transforms into preparation for receiving something your previous level of consciousness couldn't have recognized or appreciated. The deeper you go into this trust, the more you realize that your life has always been guided by an intelligence far greater than your personal mind, even when you weren't conscious of it. Every challenge you've faced has strengthened some capacity you needed for what was coming. Every seeming mistake has taught you something essential about your true nature. Every period of confusion or darkness has been followed by expansions of understanding and compassion. Nothing has been wasted. Nothing has been random. Everything has been part of consciousness exploring itself through the unique vehicle of your individual experience. This recognition brings profound peace because you realize you're not responsible for figuring out your entire life path through mental effort. You're responsible for showing up authentically in each moment and following the guidance that emerges from the deepest part of your being. The universe handles the logistics of orchestrating the perfect circumstances for your continued evolution and expression. As this trust stabilizes, you begin to experience what can only be called grace, the sense that you're being carried by a love that knows you more intimately than you know yourself, and is constantly arranging everything for your highest good, even when surface appearances suggest otherwise. This isn't blind faith or spiritual bypassing. It's a recognition based on direct experience that existence is fundamentally supportive when you align with its deeper intelligence, rather than fighting it with your limited agenda. Consider watching this transmission each morning to attune your consciousness to these frequencies before engaging with your day. When you share these concepts with someone who's ready to hear them, you're not just spreading information, you're creating energetic ripples that strengthen the field of possibility for both of you, accelerating the collective awakening that benefits all consciousness. But here's what makes this community sacred. We're not just individual people trying to improve our lives. We're consciousness exploring its own potential through human experience. Every person who awakens to their capacity for transformation strengthens the field for everyone else. When you choose growth, you're not just changing your own life. You're contributing to the collective elevation of human awareness itself. This is why your transformation matters beyond your personal satisfaction. Every time you choose love over fear, presence over reactivity, trust over control, you're demonstrating to the field of human consciousness that these choices are possible. You become living proof that people can evolve beyond their conditioning, that healing is real, that consciousness can reorganize itself in ways that seemed impossible from the previous level of awareness. So as we bring this transmission to completion, drop one word below that captures the energy you're choosing to embody moving forward. Not a word that describes how you feel right now, but a word that represents the frequency you're committing to live from. This isn't just a comment. It's your energetic signature to the quantum field, your conscious participation in declaring who you're becoming. Subscribe not just to stay connected, but to stay coherent with the field of transformation itself. Because the more of us who remember how to read the language of synchronicity, who trust the intelligence of our own evolution, who choose expansion over safety, the more the world becomes a reflection of that elevated consciousness. You are consciousness awakening to its own infinite potential through the beautiful vehicle of your human life. Your new chapter isn't waiting for perfect conditions or complete clarity. It's emerging right now through your willingness to recognize it, to trust it, and to offer yourself as the space where it can unfold. The universe has been preparing this moment of recognition your entire life. Everything that brought you to this point of readiness, every challenge that strengthened your capacity for truth, every moment of beauty that reminded you of what's possible, it all converges here, in your ability to say yes to what wants to be born through you. Your new life isn't coming. It's here, expressing itself as your recognition of these words, your willingness to feel the stirring of possibility, your courage to release what no longer serves the fullest expression of who you are. Welcome to the quantum field of your own becoming. Welcome to your new life. Understanding the mechanics of how consciousness recognizes its new configuration naturally leads to a deeper question. Who is the one observing these transformations? When you witness your thoughts changing, your patterns shifting, your reality reorganizing itself, what is the awareness that remains constant through all these changes? This brings us to the profound recognition of your true identity as the observer itself, beyond any temporary form or experience you might be having.